Well, hey, thank you for joining with me today here in from Hong Kong. And Faisal, for the first, I think back to when we first connected, and how what a I'm like the fact that I get we can I think you found me or we found each other, but um, I was like, wow, you are one unique cool cat, and I'm really excited to chat with you today about a little bit about your story, and more importantly, perspective for folks that are listening in that you can provide that I hope, if nothing else, will get people to stop and think perhaps a little differently. So thank you for honoring us with some of your time today.
Thank you very much, Chris. It's an absolute honor and privilege to be here. I don't know about cool cat. We'll let the listeners decide how cool the cat is, how to skin the cat, as they say.
Right on, right on. So let's your story is extremely important to what we're going to talk about today. And you're 35 years old. You and your brother built a textile company. You're traveling third world countries. You built this company of 10,000 employees, doing hundreds of millions of dollars. And someone might say, "Phew, man, you're the guy. Look at what you've done, and you're working in 15 countries. You're traveling around, and I think for the driven high achiever, you are success. We can do a whole episode on the idea of what the hell success is and the paradigm of success, but nonetheless, someone might say that, right? And then you got a wake up call, as you call it, right? And
Yes.
bring us back to that point in time and what happened.
Well, as you said, yes, it wasn't the outsider thinking that I had the success. I was thinking also that external definition of society's definition of success. I thought I was invincible. I was on top of the world. Just life was amazing until I was walking out of the doctor's office and he said, whatever God you believe in, please pray. And when a doctor starts to bring God into the conversation, tomorrow is going to be a very challenging day. So I had a PET CT in the morning, and the next day in the afternoon, he basically said, I'm sorry, but you have stage 3 cancer. And in 2004, that was pretty much a death warrant. It was a very different perspective of what could happen. And so from there, I don't want to make the story too long, but, went into hospital the next day, did the biopsy to confirm, because you can't start any treatment without a confirmation of what you have.
Yeah.
And so did that and agreed to a protocol of 5 rounds of chemo every 3 weeks for a total of 20 rounds, followed by a number of surgeries. But what was interesting is that the advisor of who was the founder of the cure. So I asked him, I said, what happened? And what was shocking was he said, I don't know.
Yeah.
I reminded him that I get a checkup every year, every NGen. I've got the top internist as my doc. I don't drink, I don't smoke, never tried drugs. I don't even drink coffee or tea. I'm as boring as it gets. And he said, I'm sorry, I don't know. And that's where things started to shift. As you mentioned, we were specialized in war-torn countries, in countries nobody wanted to go to. And then you're telling me at 35 that I'm most probably going to drop dead with a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. Didn't land very well, to put it lightly.
And you had 10 tumors in your body, is that right?
Yeah, the largest was a Rubik's Cube in the center of my chest. I had a tennis ball in my neck and 8 on my lungs. Chris, you know how it is, right? Big ego, big cancer.
Yeah, interesting, right? And of course you're going, why me? How me? And someone that that high achieving model, control, right? I want to control myself. I want to control my destiny. I want to control the things around me. And holy shit, now I got something I can't control, and it's inside me, right? Not only can I control it, it's in me, and. Yes. And so you can right away go into a victim mode potentially, and And it's I mean, as I thought as we're having our conversation today, it's that hopefully most folks don't have to have your experience to
Yes.
wake up. However, I think oftentimes we're running this movie of I'm bulletproof, anyone else, but until something happens in our world. And I've watched this happen with family members who've gotten strokes, to family members, people I know that have gotten heart attacks, to I have a friend right now who's got stage 4 bone cancer. I mean, we all of us could, don't have to look too far around
Yeah.
us to witness what's happening. And I think often, especially in Western society, we don't like to talk about death. That's taboo.
Yeah.
What lessons, what can we learn from the topic of facing our own mortality, do you think?
Well, look, I think the first thing, I'll touch on what you spoke to about control. So the first book I received was The Power of Losing Control. And when I read the book, I realized you have no control,
Mm,
right? Even the fact of breathing in and breathing out, you may think you have control, but I would, you know, I would question that as well, right? Because are we really in control of even that? What I think that we want to think about is the congruence of the total life, right? So if you look at, just let's take business for example. In business, we're Gujarati, we don't leverage, we're very conservative, etc. But on the personal side, whether it came to physical health, mental, emotional health, or relational health, I was more of a junk bond than Michael Milken, right? So it was incredible to see the incongruence of the whole concept of the human system, right? Saying in business, I'm working in a certain manner, but in my personal life, I'm willing to compromise my physical well-being, my mental, emotional well-being, and my relational well-being in order to crush it according to society's definition of success. And I think that's the first thing we might want to think about is, am I living in congruence because people tend to separate, right? Remember, the biggest joke is work-life balance. Work is part of life. So let's not kid ourselves, right? It's one continuum, one spectrum. Now, the idea is how do we create, you can use the word balance or equilibrium, or I would say, I don't even like, I think congruence, right? Is there congruence in this spectrum in all the pieces of my life, right? And if there isn't, then how can I choose differently?
yeah.
Right. And so when they said what they said, first I thought this is ridiculous, right? Because you're MD Anderson grads, you founded the cure, you got to be kidding me. And I was lucky enough to, one thing I learned very early was to start with the beginner's mindset and to say, and the other is to ask for help. And that's how the journey began, where I was completely out of my league, completely. But I've been out of my league in business before in many areas. But in this one, it was like, wow, we're really, and as you can imagine, I wasn't really in the mood to go with a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, right? And I can go through that whole, preparation piece later in the talk if you like. And so that was the first wake-up call, right? Congruence, right? The other was, understanding that at the end of the day, if you compromise your physical, mental, emotional, and relational well-being, your body will respond because it has a capacity at which point it says enough is enough, right? Because remember, cancer it's internal, it's not external, it's not an invasive, right? 40% of things that happen to us are virus and infections. They come from the outside. So
Yeah.
we go to the outside, like mechanics for a car, to doctors to help us. But
Right.
60% are from the inside, chronic illness, cancer, even dementia today, right? all of these are from the inside. So would you go to the mechanic if there was a manufacturer's defect, or would you go to the manufacturer? And in this case, it's ourselves. So it was a true opportunity to say, wait a minute, what's going on here? I created the ecosystem within my body so that the cancer cells exploded. Now, of course, the debate when it comes to a child, I have no comment, because that's a conversation I still am not able to understand unless we go to karma and some other things, which to me is heartbreaking, right? So,
Right.
but in terms of my case here, I'm speaking about myself, Chris. Please, everybody else has their journey, their thought process of whatever their challenges they're dealing with. In my case, it was, how could I have contributed to this ecosystem? And that's how I started to ask that question, and step by step ask for help, in those three realms.
It's a really an empowered way to go, because I would challenge to say that most people would advocate responsibility somewhere else. And by creating 100% responsibility, saying, okay, I don't know maybe what it was at this moment, but if I have my paradigm is that somehow, some way, I created an environment for something to grow, behave, then by taking that first step, you actually created empowerment so that you could do something about it. And I believe it's a big part of what allowed you to get to remission, because of that paradigm of belief. And even though you went to help and you might have said, fix me, which I think I've done that myself, like, oh, my neck feels like whatever. Chiropractor, fix me, I had acupuncture yesterday. I go to this amazing Japanese acupuncturist, and I'm like, XYZ feels off. Fix me, but that's not necessarily advocating for ourselves, right? It's like asking someone else to do something for us, but we have to look into where can we take ownership and our relational side of what that means and feel like. So I commend you for that. And the other part that really kind of, at what point did you decide that, okay, you had this experience, now you start building this team of people around you, you're learning a lot, right? And then you're going like, whoa, these resources are really awesome. And having these resources is really important. And I want my family to have these resources. So it created this almost like it came together for you to see, gee, I could build an international family office. Maybe that wasn't that you weren't that far yet, but by creating this path, that it led to that you could say, you know what, I could take what I did for myself and my family and provide this level of experience for other people. And then, so you took a challenge or a huge situation, as someone might call it, a setback, and used it for almost like a reboot to take your purpose to a whole other level beyond textiles.
So I agree. It wasn't that simple, right, Chris? I had 20 rounds of chemo. You can imagine they beat the living daylights out of me. Yes, I was fortunate enough that I handed over the company within 48 hours of diagnosis.
Okay.
I had created a foundation at 27, which is the equivalent of a trust in the United States at the age of 27. So I did not have to sign papers or scramble. The house was in order. So those two things allowed me to have time, because they had said to me, either you need to give 100% or it's going to be game over. So that's how they had presented it, right?
Okay.
And so yes, I was fortunate enough that within about 2.5 weeks of, again, diagnosis, I was in front of a kinesiologist who has now progressed to a very different level today. And I was in front of her having my first conversation of what is going on. So I did that over the year, right? Because I was in and out of hospital about 11 months. And And what happened was it all began with family members, we're Gujaratis, so the numbers are large, started to get sick. So initially it was about access, about medical care, what is the best care, spending time with them to get that second opinions. But then there was the piece of what triggered this? What was the source?
Yeah.
And that's how it began. It began in a very informal way, right? Let's be, let's bring humility to the process and
Yes.
and respect to the fact that it was very challenging, right? And so it began with that, with family members asking for support, and some were open to have that conversation of source, and some were not, and it was their choice, right? Most of them knew because it came out of them. It wasn't me or any of the experts telling them. It was questions being asked that are very basic and fundamental, and the answer coming out of them very quickly. So a family health office was created for our family. And then from there, in May of 2013, the official launch of Genetic Care, initially for friends and family, and then eventually for other families of family businesses and family offices. So yeah, it was a gift. But again, when I finished my 20 rounds of chemo and 2 surgeries at the time, not the third, they gave me a probability of 50-50.
Wow.
And I didn't know how to go forward. And I asked the doc, and the doc said, it's simple. I'm gonna do what I need to do, right? You're gonna do what you need to do. Your family's gonna do what they need to do. And then the big boss, and if referred to God, is gonna do the rest. So until then, live normally. And if this comes back, we'll deal with it. But the scary part was that there was no second line of treatment. It was all exploratory. So it would have been not a very good experience if it had come back, right? So I sold most of the companies, kept one. I spoke to a lot of elderlies at the time, and I said, guys, I want to just give back. They said, no, you need a machine to have the money to give back. So don't go asking people for money. Keep one machine running so that you can give back. And so that's how, things evolved over time. So it was a continuum of going through the pain, going through the suffering. But in this case, like you said, the suffering was minimal, because when I say suffering, means not the physical, because I didn't resist what was, because the cards that were laid to me.
Yeah.
Right. And what really brought it home was that every time I had a PET CT, and I had a lot of them, right, because the markers had to drop by 90% every 5 rounds. So that means the disease had to be reduced by 90% every 3 weeks to be able to come to normality. That's how off balance I was, right? So every time I had a PET CT, when I was in the little donut, right? It's a little better now. The other side's open. And when I had it, the other side wasn't open. So it's a little more comfortable today. I would meditate, and I would visualize saying goodbye. And I visualized my parents, my brother, my cousin brother, my spouse. But what really brought reality home was that my body wouldn't even allow me to visualize saying goodbye to my 2 boys. And that was the wake-up call of, wow, right? This is, people talk about it when it's time.
Yeah.
But it's not so easy and not so simple. And I've been doing that exercise ever since.
Yeah.
Continue doing it. So I think it's a very humbling experience from that perspective. But to answer, it was a process. It's they always say, right? Yeah, we're, every company, whether it's FedEx or wherever, yeah, it's an overnight success, and it was 10 years, right? So let's be real.
What, outside of obviously wanting to stay alive for your family, was there any other resources you pulled on to get you through some of the the low lows?
Yeah, look, I had like I said, I mean, I did a lot of reading, but I had a number of what you would call experts that helped me. So from everything from functional medicine to integrative medicine to psychotherapy to Ayurveda to mind trainers to yoga instructors to kinesiologists. So slowly, step by step, I started to understand a lot of the pieces. And what was interesting is one of them very early on said that you're very powerful here. And obviously, this is an audio, which I'm pointing to my head, right? That you're very powerful in your head. And through this experience, if you really learn the lesson, you will become very powerful in your heart. And with that combo, you will, God willing, or whatever word, universe, create something that you could never imagine. And that was kind of implanted, right? Just like when I was in school, I remember in grade 9, my counselor implanted a school in my head. And it was interesting. I ended up going to that university because they just planted a seed. And this was a seed that was planted by one of the members now of my core team that said, this is an opportunity for you to really, really, balance and find a rhythm between head and heart, right? The balance, not, and obviously I've written a book on 4 steps, and
Yeah.
it's interesting, right? The unity of head and heart. So that was, I think, the it's always nudges, right? Those little nudges that help you rethink, what is my purpose? Why am I here? And of course, the question was obviously that if I survive, how am I going to choose differently?
Mm.
Not just for the boys, right? Because that was my purpose. That was my driver, right? But now that I'm alive, beyond that, how am I going to live, right? How am I going to be of service? How am I going to be in gratitude for this second chance? So my halftime, unlike most people who have it at 50, 60, was at 35. Now you can say it's a good thing. You can say it's not. That's open to debate. But for me, all I can say is that I'm grateful that I had cancer versus dropping of a heart attack or something else that could have easily happened, right? And so, because in cancer, I know it's I don't want to put it down, but you have time. That's the advantage of cancer, that you have time in most cases to say sorry, to prepare, to mend, to, speak the truth, cry, whatever it is, right? You have that opportunity. And that was the blessing within, the incredibly challenging experience that I went through. But it was also very challenging. I mean, imagine for my parents, way more challenging probably than me, because they were watching.
Mm.
Right? The boys didn't really understand. They understood energetically, but not conceptually, because they were 1 and 3. And then obviously for my spouse at the time, right? And for her, her mother had passed away when she was 18 of ovarian cancer. And
Mm.
here she was at 27 with a spouse who's being told he might drop. Like that's pretty brutal.
Yeah. And then so then you had ended up getting divorced as well years later.
Yes.
What were the lessons that came out of that?
Well, going back to the suffering versus pain, in the first experience of cancer, I, like you said, in a very short time, was able to embrace what was and not resist, right? And as a result, I went through a lot of pain, but there was less suffering, because suffering is resisting what is.
Yeah.
While when I was going through the divorce, I resisted what was. And as a result, I suffered.
Mm.
Even though technically the cancer was a lot more painful, right? Physically, from all realms, right? Like that's true death. But here was a different form of death, right? We're till death do us part is what is ingrained, right? And so when that conversation took place, I mean, even my physical body went completely sideways. My standing heart rate was at 95, 98 for 3.5 months until I went to do a silent retreat, where I was able to then balance my parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. And so I was quote unquote in limbo, but it was interesting because the conversation took place 3 weeks after I built my team for genetic care. And genetic care actually supported me to have purpose beyond this, quote unquote, shattering experience that was going on. So the lesson that you're asking for is, how can we choose to embrace what is, irrespective of how misaligned, unfathomable, right? Completely, shocking experience that's happening, right? And how can we do that? Because we always, we control two things in life only. This is what I learned, Chris, right? The meaning we give to what happens and our response. Yeah. Nothing else, right? And one of the things that I would love the boys, right, to learn, and obviously whoever else wants to listen, is that we always have choice, right? That response is our choice. And in this case, my choice was resistance, not looking for the opportunity and the gift. I could not understand what kind of gift could there be in a family being dismantled, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Right? The nuclear family was, from our beliefs and patterns, the foundation of life, right? And everything was built from that, right? The harmony that was there allowed for everything else to occur. But you see how incongruent that is? On one hand, we have that belief system, and on the other hand, I spent most of my game time at work, right, and brought home the leftovers.
Yes.
It was a joke, and the joke was on me.
Yeah.
Right? It was sad, but it's my truth. It wasn't game time in the morning for work and game time when I came home. It was game time and leftovers. When on the other hand, we say everything is about family. I'm doing this for you.
Right.
This is all about you.
Sacrificing for you.
Exactly.
Right? So I can provide this shit for you.
Yeah.
Everyone else. I'm not going to ask you what you really want.
Well, she used to say it. She used to say, I'd rather have you travel less, be home more.
Yeah.
Right? Because the money is not going to bring us happiness.
Right.
And of course, my need to prove my worth and to be good enough and all those fun things were driving me in a very different speed.
Yeah. It's the quality time and connection is what's being asked of. But the paradigm is, I must prove my value to society and you by winning and being the best and having power and authority. Yeah.
And that's the thing, right? What you just mentioned is, I only worked and was with family. I didn't socialize much. We didn't go partying, nothing. But what was still sad was that I was physically there, but mentally not and emotionally not. Like that was the real sad truth.
What helped you realize that? What helped you realize that? I mean, some people today would still be not figuring that out.
Well,
Maybe on number four.
Well, I think the absolute lack of control, right? I mean, the first thing you learn, at least for me in cancer, was that yes, you have no control, as you said, but also that you need to depend on others. right?
Yeah.
And as you do that, you learn from their level of presence and their level of being truly there, and you say, wow, was I ever like that myself as I moved through the day, right? Was I truly there in that moment?
Yeah.
Or was I just going through the motion? Right? And that's, so the experience of that day to day opened up a whole new space of, wait a minute, I'm physically present. And then, of course, I asked my spouse, and she said, yeah, I would ask you a question. And this is two of us on date night. And she said, I'd ask you a question, and you'd say, huh? And then I ask you again, and you'd say, huh? And then I would just stop. And this is two of us on a dining table in a restaurant, right?
Yeah.
Right? This is me, Chris. So I'm not going to hide behind the, something this is the truth, right? And
I get it.
It's sad, but that's what I was.
I've been in that place myself many years ago, so I get it. Yep, I get it. I get it. I mean, it comes down to your willingness to raise your level of consciousness and your ability to do that. And unless you can, or willing, everybody can, but unless you're willing to learn and go through the process, you continue to sleepwalk otherwise, and then everyone else is the problem. Right?
But I just hope and pray that from today's sharing, and I'm sure there's many others, which I've listened to some of your podcasts, is that I've paid the school fees. Don't pay them again.
Yeah.
Right? I've paid them already. Yeah. Right? On behalf of many of us. So how can we listen to this, not as that's not me, I'm not like that, I'm not so checked out, or I'm not so whatever, right? But there are parts of me, even today, right, that do some of that.
Of course.
Right? Let's be honest, right? We're human, right? And so it's how can we be, choose moment by moment.
Yeah.
Right? And I know it's easier said than done, but really bring in intentionality before each encounter, right? I have, a dear friend who always says, as he walks in the door, he says, what would love do now? Whether he's entering into a meeting, whether it's entering into his home, whether it's entering into a gym, whatever it is, into his car, he asks himself, what would love do now? And as we bring that, and you can change love to something else, right? Whatever resonates for you, just to bring us back to that center, bring us back home, right? And I think home maybe is, center for some, it's like, oh, these guys are talking, out in the air again.
No, that's really, really, really good and profound. And the last questions I wanted to ask you in regards to your experience and what you can provide in perspective. What would be your advice to someone that really is looking to get more clarity on their purpose?
Well, we do this exercise, and I'm not here to market, but we do this exercise called the Power of Nine. And you can go onto the website, and if you want, I can share the link with you. And the exercise is to really do an exercise, a review of your values, your three values, your three talents, and your three aspirations. And when we say talents, we mean inner genius. And that every day, as you go through your day or your decisions, you begin with it. And the idea is to embody it. So there's actually a breathing exercise and a movement exercise that you do, which will help you realize or understand whether what you've written is in congruence with your core. So this is not just a left brain, let me write this down. And talent is not my expertise. Okay, this is really my inner being, right? And so through that, it helps you then move towards my purpose, right? Because people, now everybody's like, oh, this is my purpose, and what's my my passion and all of that, we have to understand that there could be a difference between what you're really good at and what your purpose is. And it's to be able to either find purpose within what you're good at, or be okay that I could be really good at this, but I still am focusing in that direction. And that's the challenge that many of us have today, right? That we end up letting go of what we're good at, and then are challenged because we're just moving in the other direction, right? And especially when you talk about halftime, right, that I spoke to before, the idea is that what strengths can I use from my genius to be able to give back? And so in my case, I operated in third world countries and challenging countries where I learned crisis preparation and crisis management, right? And being completely out of my league many times. And in this company, it started with that too. But the difference there was government and countries. Here, it's human beings and families, right? So you're still using that skill set. And that's something that I would encourage everyone to sit back and say, wait a minute, what is my inner genius? What is that? And be humble, but at the same time, celebrate.
Yeah.
Right? Acknowledge. Because, many of us are not willing to bring ourselves up to that space of, wait a minute, actually, I'm really good at that. And I'll just give one example before you ask the next question, is I always ask people to say, when somebody hears the name Chris, what are the 3 things that come to mind immediately? And do that exercise with 5 people.
Yeah.
And then listen, and you will find a lot of your inner genius. I'd rather you do it internally, but you can have a little bit of an affirmation of that inner genius from 5 people. But they need to answer quickly, Chris, not, oh, let me think about it, right? Like really literally, what are the 3 words that come up? And that will help you, right? To kind of just find the space. I don't want to go into a huge process, but this is just something that works, because we have a lot of people who come in, they sell their companies, or they're going from management to advisory. And when they don't do that exercise, like I had somebody yesterday come in and he said the person is lost.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. What happens if you end up very sick like I did? Because you ask yourself, who am I?
That's right.
And that is not a good question to be asking. At 35, it's still okay. But when you're 75 or 80 and not well, I've been there with many people. It's a tough experience, right? So I think who am I is important through these 3 pieces. Then what is my purpose? Because that will guide you towards that, because at least you have the pieces of the puzzle to move towards that. I don't know. I hope that answers your question.
No, it's really, really good. Yeah. You wrote a book, 4 Steps to Flow, Living a Meaningful Life, right? And it's on Amazon. Where else can we direct people to learn more about you and what your organization does?
I mean, look, in the company's called Genetic Care, right? We've done about 80 webinars since COVID, because a lot of families and individuals were really challenged. Yeah. So we started off the first 5 weeks, we did 14 webinars, because people were really, from homeschooling to leading from remotely to communication to relationships to parenting. I mean, people were really thrown off. So that's, and that comes in podcast form. It comes in, so that's, I think, something that would
you're on YouTube too, correct?
Yeah. Yep. Yes. So it's YouTube, Apple Podcasts, so I think that would be a great resource. I happen to be the host, but there's an expert on every podcast or webinar, if you want to physically see, and most of them are best in class in terms of what they do, all the way to dementia, to endocrinology. So it's the physical side. So we've got gut health, brain health, sleep health, nutrition, fitness, genomics, epigenetics, thoughts, emotions, communication, relationships, beliefs and patterns, mind, body. I don't want to go,
Yeah.
it's the whole 9 yards. So that's the value, and it's free, of course. And we did it for free because people were really, really thrown off, and that's what I would really encourage people, right? And that's what happened to me, is that have you built the physical muscle? Have you built the mental, emotional muscle and the relational muscle to have the resilience to be agile and adaptable no matter what happens in life? In this case, it happened to be COVID, right? In my case, I ended up with cancer and then a relational issue. We're all going to have challenges that are going to be presented, right? Many of us running businesses are challenged continuously in terms of viability, in terms of adaptability. So it's resilience, agility, adaptability, right? And the 4 steps talks about the experience of embracing what is, right? Trusting, right? Which means seeing the opportunity, remaining calm, right? So calm and centeredness, eventually leading to clarity of head and heart, not just head, but head and heart, to live in a state of flow. And the idea is that flow is not something that you just experience when you're running or doing a sport or making love. It's a state of being that is a choice, right? That we can continue to choose moment to moment, And again, we can do that through building that muscle, whether it's through meditation, whether it's journaling, right? All the different pieces that I know you have as a daily practice, right? That are there to help you to be able to be in that. And of course, our children are the first ones to remind us when we're not in flow or not in presence. They're the best policemen in that space.
Yeah. My daughter said recently, Dad, I haven't seen you write in your journal. I said, well, it's kind of private. No, but I haven't seen you do it. Have you? She's 7. So
Yeah, because she's feeling some of the stuff that should be in the journal being projected at her, Chris, or projected to her mom.
Yeah.
So
quit picking up what's going on. Don't need another mirror.
Well, the children come to teach you the lessons you need to learn, right?
Right.
Dr. Shafali reminds us all the time, right? So if you're not ready to learn, don't have children, because they're going to take it home.
Yeah. Well, thank you for taking the time out. This has been a really amazing conversation, and I really, really enjoyed it. And I know that folks listening are getting a lot from the conversation. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thanks again for staying up a little late in order to do this with the time difference. So I really appreciate that. And I look forward to continuing our conversations and just loving the experience of being connected and being alive. So thank you again. Thank you everyone for listening and taking the time. And we continue to be of service, Chris, together. Thank you.